Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Bande Jagadgurum. Om. Adorations to Lord Krishna, the preceptor of the universe, destroyer of the forces of darkness, bestower of immortality. Om Shri Krishnaya Namah. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 3, known as Karma Yoga, the field of karma is presented before you in a profound way. Verse number is 40. Indriyani mano buddhir asyadhisthana muchyate etairvimoha yatyesha jnanamavritya dehinam. The senses, the mind and the intellect are said to be the dwelling places of desire. Through these, desire deludes the ignorant who are identified with their bodies. All these statements are very profound. Soul, essentially, soul in every individual, essentially is Supreme Self, Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, that rings in the heart of every individual. No one is bigger or smaller. They're all same. Sun reflects in countless jars with little water. No matter whatever may be the reflected sun and its condition, every reflected sun is the sun. Simple, it's not mathematics, just simple. And same is the reality in every individual. But how to realize that reality? The soul is led by mind, intellect, senses, unconscious. And the most prominent trouble, the cause of the trouble is desire, called kama. It's kama that gives you two directions. Kama that will lead you more and more into the whirling wheel of the world process. Or kama being sublimated. When kama becomes purified, it becomes aspiration for God realization. So if you develop that type of sublimation of kama, you are moving towards enlightenment. Now coming to a practical point, it is, when you study theoretically, it seems like a two distinct movements. In practice, there is always a mix-up. You may have certain degree of purified desire, but then you have to understand how much you are involved with deluded desire. So you are not always, just like you are in water. And your predicament is not pure mathematical. When you are sinking, when your head come up, how do you swim, in what condition you are. Without going through too much of those details, kama, desire, exists, abides in the senses and the mind in a gross way. Conscious mind and your indriyas, senses. When we talk of indriyas, we are referring to 10 indriyas. 5 are jnanendriyas, senses of perception. 5 are organs of action. Your hand, feet, your mouth, all become organs of action. And your perceptions, all the 5 senses of perception. Ears, eyes, nose, touch, taste. All these senses, they are involved with kama in a gross way. Subtle way, the kama abides in your mind and in your intellect. In other words, if you want to control your kama, turn your attention to your mind. Allow your intellect to become purified. If that movement has not started, that sadhana movement, then you are under the grip of kama, and that's a description of misery beyond imagination. Even one lifetime gives you so much. And if you have to go on coming back endlessly, that's miserable misery. Now, more details to be understood. Allow your senses to turn in a sattvic direction. There are 3 modes of nature: tamas, rajas, and sattva. If your mind is dull, then you seek comfort by moving toward tamas. Tamas. Say, for example, you have stress. Someone brings the news, you have the most tragic story in the film. That's okay. My stress will be forgotten. But you are being drawn to a tamasic state. That type of movement is delusion. That kama in you has become your robber. Rajasic, which is not so terrible, but gives you lots of distractions. Rajasic means you have gained some good experience by visiting a pilgrimage center, or without pilgrimage center, a center where there are good foods and good things to eat and a lot of amusement. Now, your friends bring you pictures of similar, and they begin to describe the experiences in that particular center is much better than what you had. This is a Rajasic world where people constantly come together to share their information of where did they have wonderful fun. And if you stay in that, that's the Rajasic. Your kama movement, desire movement will be uncontrolled. Kama is described papapma. Worst, mahapapapma. Worst sinful enemy. And all this becomes possible because the soul is in a state of ignorance, which implies instead of the awareness, I am Satchit Ananda, that's the instinctive urge in every individual. Existence, absolute existence. Absolute awareness, absolute joy. Everyone is looking for that. Everyone wants to be settled in such a way that you are not shaken by the world. That's what the mind wants, to have some stability. That because Sat, absolute existence, is your essential nature. You want to know everything. Little by little, of course. But there is always, mind is open to knowing more and more and more. Deep down, you are all-knowing self. Therefore, that all-knowing potentiality within you gives you the urge not to stay quiet unless you go on knowing more and more. Likewise, Ananda, bliss. Deep down, bliss is your essential nature. When you go to sleep, everything is cut off from you, your mind, intellect, ego, body, your wonderful properties, your wonderful possessions, your near and dear ones, all move away. And after a good sleep, you wake up with a joyous face. Where did you get that happiness? But in daily life, your happiness is among the objects, among relatives, in the world of time and space. And the mind is stressed how to be happy. You move away from your essential nature, Satchit Ananda, because you are identified with your body. Body, again, to understand more profoundly, 5 sheaths. Physical body is Annamaya Kosha. Behind the physical body, there is a layer of vital forces, Pranamaya Kosha. Behind your vital forces, layer of mind and senses, called Manomaya Kosha. And behind Manomaya Kosha, there is intellect and ego. That's the subtler level. that rules over your personality, how you understand. Intellect does the understanding and then looks at the mind. Now, the mind looks at the senses. You start working for it. So, and beyond Vijnanamaya Kosha is Anandamaya Kosha. That's where you go into deep sleep. It is not completely transcendental, but it is beyond these physical body, prana, mind, intellect, ego, beyond all that, in the depths of unconscious. Now, therefore, in order to understand this, you have to also understand three directions: Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. And in order to be on the right course, allow Sattvic movement, even in the case of food, the Sattvic food, Rajasic food, Tamasic food. Everything in the world is studied in the three modes of nature. Association you want to keep: Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic. Your ego goes into three stages: Tamasic ego, Rajasic ego, Sattvic ego. But it is not, all this is told not just to make a mathematical evaluation, but understand it is natural in every individual. In the morning you will have, your mind may be Sattvic. Later it becomes Rajasic. Later it becomes Tamasic. But Tamasic again doesn't mean that it has dominated your entire mind. A tree goes on shaking. Shaking doesn't mean that it is being broken down. So if you have more sattva within yourself, you handle rajas and tamas like wind blowing. You allow yourself to be shaken as a part of a nature's process to be strong at the root. To figure that out. Ask the trees. So therefore, spiritual movement is not strict mathematical movement. We also use the term sthiti and avastha. You may be advanced to such an extent that you will not really fall for worldly temptations. But at the same time, your mind will have the memories. Your mind will have its attractions. The mind will remember everything. Let me give you a crude illustration. If you are diabetic, the doctor asks you now, stop all the wonderful rasgullas, sweets, etc. And if you love your health, then you do. Your mind has come to the understanding not to take those things. But whenever those things are presented to you, your eyes will glare. Your mind will think of the taste. But don't be upset by it. Allow your reason to be superior. and allow your mind not to get too much involved. So that type of subtle movement allows you to control karma. It is not a simple movement. Oh, karma, come, I'm going to give you a slap. So if you allow your intellect to get into a deeper understanding of who am I, a deeper process of love of God, if your intellect begins to be highlighted in your personality in a profound way, karma exists in that level of intellect in a subtle form. And therefore, that Godward intellect sublimates that karma very effectively. Sabko sanmati de Bhagavan. Satsanga therefore becomes a powerful remedy. And satsanga implies you listen to the same teachings again and again and again. Spiritual food, ahara shuddhau sattva suddhi, allowing all the intakes become sattvic. That begins to purify your intellect. In 41st verse, tasmat tvamindriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. O best of Bharatas, that's Arjuna, having first subdued the Indriyas, slay this sinful enemy, the destroyer of knowledge and realization. First give focus on your Indriyas. Simple first stage, do not go into extremes. Control yourself. If you are keeping yourself away from extreme, you are in a position to evaluate your movement. Is it right? Is it wrong? But if you are in a process of extreme involvement, you have no possibility to evaluate. Even if mind has a little sneak of understanding, you have already taken your trip in a plane, and it is for far out New Zealand. Nothing wrong about New Zealand. I'm joking. You have already planned all that. Now in that state, you can't control yourself. Sense has put you in that type of predicament. Therefore, in daily life, a discipline has to operate. So if you are practicing yoga sadhana, yoga exercises, pranayams, concentrating upon various centers, you are allowing your higher centers to operate, and how do you feel when they operate? All this allows you to develop your ability to have your choice, not being just swept. So, having first subdued the indriyas. Slay this sinful enemy. Slay term simply is allegorical. Kama or desire is kind of a short-circuited energy. And you don't slay a short-circuited condition, you correct it. The moment you correct it, the enemy is gone. The enemy was not a real reality. If a healthy condition develops within yourself, spiritual health, automatically desire for the world will not exist. And where there is a desire, there is also anger. Kama and Krodha go together. And therefore they create mental stress. I'm giving you a little taste of Saint Gyaneshwar. In Gyaneshwari, he gives a very poetic detail what Kama, Krodha do. They devastate the picturesque forest of Santosh. Santosh is contentment. If you have spiritual contentment, you are in a picturesque forest. Everything is so wonderful. The world itself becomes a picturesque forest, full of joyous sources of inspiration. And that's the ideal to reach. But Kama, Krodha, they devastate this whole forest. Turn your head anywhere and there is no satisfaction. Breaks down the castle of Dhairya. Dhairya is patience. The ability to be patient makes you like a king in a big castle. But gripped by Kama, Krodha, that castle becomes destroyed. You have no Dhairya. Impatience, agitated movement, quick temper, that begin to dominate your personality. And Kama tears up the tiny shoots of joy, that opportunities. Beautiful day, sun is shining, clouds are looking wonderful. A peacock started dancing before you. And a squirrel smiled at you. Is an opportunity for shoots of joy. The joy is coming out like a little shoot. But Kama, looking behind your mind, with ugly nose, ugly tongue, like a snake, with raga, dvesha, attachment, hatred, bifurcated tongue. Now it spoils all that. The shoots of joy that were going to make your day a wonderful day. Now it's no more a wonderful day. wipes away happiness. When sad face comes, mother wipes the face and be joyous. But kama does different. Joyous face? Oh no. What? Enhances three tapas, threefold miseries. Threefold miseries. Misery, subjective, body, mind, handling your body, mind, that's lots of things about it. Misery coming from the world, and misery that you hear about by some act of will, God's will. Storms and terrible wars, etc. All this, you live in a world where all the three are there, subjective, the world objective, and act of God. And all the three are impacting your mind constantly. But desire-dominated mind will collect all the negativity from yourself, from the world around, and from act of God. Kama does rang mein bhang. Rang means things are wonderful around him. All things are in harmony, and suddenly some strange creature started uttering sound that is so bad. And virtuous qualities, they enter into a deceptive process. Godly spirits. What happens? Desire takes the form of godly spirits. Kama enters in your psychology as if they are messengers of God, godly people. In other words, it seems to your mind, led by your kama, that what advice you are getting from within is very good for you. Try to understand now the psychological point, which implies you go after superficial appearance of virtuous qualities. You don't develop humility, but want to be described as a humble person. Therefore, if you can bribe people, do things, trickery, to make yourself appear virtuous. That's how the divine spirits are, the negative qualities are acting like divine spirits. In the old story, like Rahu and Ketu sat in line with gods, appearing like gods, and they sipped the nectar. So similarly, the positive forces and negative forces, they become confused. You don't know which one is positive. Therefore, remedies your satsanga, your integral yoga practice in daily life, that allows you to understand the difference. Being happy because of your good qualities. Not happy because you have asked them to make praise you in every way possible. So whenever you sit with a society, praises are sung. So many people get up and start praising. Thereby, what is happening? Apparently, you are highlighting, I am a virtuous person. But internally, you are highlighting your ego inflation. And this is a very subtle trick that goes on that requires profound involvement in sadhana with patience. Kama drowns the soul into the mud puddle of the world process. Drowns the soul even when there is no water, and yet it is drowned. So many deer die because of mirage and there is no water there. Burns people up without actual fire, and so forth. I've just given you a taste of Jnaneshwari. The description of Kama. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manah manasastu parabuddhir yo buddhe partastu saha. The sages say that the senses are higher than the objects, while higher than the senses is the mind. The intellect is even higher than the mind, and higher than the intellect is the Supreme Self. This understanding is important in order to sublimate Kama. You need to control your senses. In order to control your senses, you must move away from those objects that degrade you. And your senses, guided by your intellect, have the capacity. Objects have no reality in them. No matter how tempting an object, all the money, the green dollars, they are not shouting at you. But led by through your mind, you invested on them the idea that they are my support. They give me happiness. So now with that type of mind, look at the dollars. And put your mind flutter. Senses are higher than the objects. Objects will have no validity without your senses. However, in Kathopanishad, the sage describes a little different way. The description is, objects are higher than the senses. Seems like contradiction. But the idea behind it The senses and objects, they are interdependent. So in interdependence, your mind must not ignore the senses and the objects. Both become of value. In other words, someone hearing senses are higher than these objects develops the idea, I will just control the senses. Shut up all my doors, we stay for a whole day without looking at any object of the world. That was the wrong track. In that case, what happens? You thought that you have controlled your senses. But when you go out, objects dominate your mind. So now you are seeing that objects are more powerful than your concept of controlling the senses. So that point is brought out. So it goes both ways. Dealing with objects, have your discrimination, which objects you must go after. Higher than the senses is the mind. That's a simple point. Your eyes don't accomplish seeing. Mind has to be there with your eyes. Otherwise, the eyes are always looking. Your mind is not attending to your eye movement. You are not really seeing anything. So, mind is higher than your senses. Eye is only one illustration. All the five senses require mind behind them. The intellect is even higher than the mind. Your intellect is that basis for your understanding. You have to also understand not intellectual data. Let me go into Google and ask about so many different views about mental stress. You will find thousands of different views, thousands of ways of curing it. All that can be interesting if you follow, not all of it, but follow that which will help you. But if your mind is simply collecting the data, you remain completely in a state of hollowness. So intellect has to be that type of intellect that does not collect data, but changes your date. Brings practical change in your life. But in order that your intellect may perform this in a profound way, to make your intellect work in a profound way, go after subtler point. What rules your intellect? There comes now very profound psychology. If you are doing japa, spiritual sadhana, now a subtle channel opens. A divine touch begins to work upon your intellect. Something profound begins to inspire you. People have that type of experience. Normal intellect that you need for mathematical questions and answers. Here you need answers to your profounder problems and an angle of vision, to change the angle of vision. All that becomes possible through your intellect that has been touched by something divine. Put it in a very simple way. If you allow bhakti to enter your heart, devotion, but devotion will not enter your heart with one simple method. It requires all bhakti movement. You do japa, you do meditation, satsanga, you change your daily style of life. All that is implied, all that you will start doing and making your life more and more prayerful. Then your intellect is not under the control of your ego. That intellect has a hand of God behind it. That stage again is not an ordinary stage. It presents challenges in your life. Because ego's attitudes keep your life cozy. But now, a subtler change is needed in your nature. And your intellect now becomes a channel of a divine behind. So that challenge has to be experienced. And if you are sadhaka, that God will give you dhairya, patience. The more patience, greater is your ability to face a challenge and emerge successful out of it. Each time the moon emerges out of a dark cloud, it shines brighter. A poetic way of saying. Each time you emerge successful, survive a challenge in a divine, with the help of divine movement, you are never the same person. And you become deeply indebted to those adverse situations. With this I will conclude. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Hari Om.